Alright, so welcome back everybody. So for this video, I'm going to be explaining how to play Zooloretto. This is definitely an older game for sure. So, obviously the components are going to look obviously old school, but it's also a very good game nonetheless. And some people might have the version that has Rio Grande games on it. My box has Z-Man games on it instead. So it's technically, I guess, from both publishers. But this one also adds a new species to the game, lions to the game as well. So now there's 9 species of Zooloretto animals in this game to play with instead of 8. So that's something else. That's pretty cool. So let me explain how to play this game, Zooloretto. So you want to try to fill in your zoo, fill in your enclosures as much as you possibly can. You can even eventually get an additional enclosure as well. Once you have enough money to pay for it, you can expand your zoo. But you want to try to fill it in as much as possible because you're going to get victory points based on how full your enclosures are. So this big enclosure down here, if you can completely fill it with one species of animals, it's going to give you 10 points. If you miss it by just one square, so if this section is full of animals but not this, then you're only going to get 6 points. And if only these 4 squares up here are filled and these 2 aren't, then you don't get any of these points here. But if you do have a kiosk at this location, then you'll get 1 point for each animal that is in your enclosure. So that's how you're going to get points. Now, it's different for each enclosure. This one has 2 kiosks you can put down. But if you fill in this enclosure, at most you're only going to get 5 points, and then 4 for second highest. For this enclosure, you're at most going to get 8 points, and then second highest 5 points. And of course, it also has a kiosk, so you could still score some points if you don't have a full enclosure. And then this one up here, the additional enclosure has enough for 5 animals, and so it can give you 9 victory points and 5 victory points for second highest. So that's basically how you're going to score victory points. However, there are a lot of ways that you can be deducted points too. So as you collect animal tiles, so in this game, you're going to be collecting animal tiles from this bag, so to speak, and putting them on trucks. You play with 1 truck for each player. So if you're playing a 5-player game, there will be 5 of these trucks out. But right now, there's just 2 because I have it set up for a 2-player game. But you're going to be taking animals and kiosks and coin tokens, and you're going to be putting them on the trucks. Then you're going to be taking them, and you're going to be trying to divvy out the animals into different enclosures. There are several different animals in this game. So in a 2-player game, you basically have to remove 4 species of animals. And the reason why I say 4 and not 3 is because this Zooloretto game comes with an additional additional animal called the lion. And so I actually have to I actually had to take out 4 animals instead of 3 for a 2-player game. So you'll have to take extra note of that if you have the lion as an additional animal. So this game has the kangaroo. It, for instance, is going to have the elephant. It's going to have a lion. It's going to have the giant panda. And it's also going to have the zebra. So that means I had to remove 4 species. So I removed the chimpanzee, the flamingo, the camel, and then the leopard was the 4th animal I removed. So those are the 4 animals that I'm not playing with for this demonstration of how to play the game. So anyways, you're going to try to fill in your zoo, but the barn here, once an enclosure is full of a particular species, because you can never put multiple species in the same enclosure, you can only have 1 species in each enclosure, but you could potentially, if you wanted to, you could have 2 enclosures with the same species. So, for instance, if you had a lot of, I don't know, zebras, you could put them both into these 2 enclosures and fill these 2 enclosures up with zebras if you wanted to. That is an option. But once you have Once these enclosures here are full or have at least one species obviously inside of it, then additional species that you take must go to the barn. So since I technically only have room for 3 right now, plus an additional one later, I only have room for 4 species at most, and there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 species in the game. There are 5 species that are in the game. So that means one species is bound to end up in the barn and not in your zoo. So that's the thing. And then for each different species that's in your barn, you're deducted 2 points. Now you're asking probably, well, I will at most just have one species in here. I might have multiple animals of that one species, but it sounds like I'm only going to lose 2 points. That's not correct. Because when you fill in an enclosure with animals, and they have nowhere else to go, because, let's say this fills up with zebras, and you have the panda in this one, and the elephant in this one, and the lion in this one. Well, that means that now that you have more zebras, they're going to end up in here, in the barn. Which means now you've got multiple species that are in this barn, so you're going to be deducted way more than 2 points. And not only that, but you'll notice we only have a few spots for kiosks. There's 3, 4, and potentially 5 kiosks that you can fill in with your zoo here. And there are 12 kiosks in this bag. There are 12 of them, okay? And 5. So that means the other player is only going to also have 5 in a 2-player game. That means there are 2 additional ones in the bag that will probably, unless they're in this little stack here, will probably end up here in your barn potentially. And for each different looking kiosk you have in your barn, that's also 2 points you're going to lose. So you could potentially lose a lot of points for having kiosks and animals sitting in your barn here. So that's something to note, obviously. And if you're unable to completely fill in an enclosure, now that may not be likely in a 2-player game. You'll probably fill in every enclosure in a 2-player game. But if you're playing a 5-player game, that is most likely going to happen. You're most likely not going to completely fill in all of your enclosures, for sure. So that's like the differences to that. But that also means you probably won't end up in a 5-player game. You probably won't end up with having a bunch of kiosks or any at all in your barn. Now here's the good news. If you have some kiosks, not only can they potentially give you some points for the animals in your enclosures that aren't in a full enclosure, but for each individual type of kiosk, there's like 4 different types of kiosks, okay? For each different type of kiosk, that's 2 points. So if you had all 4, that'd be 2, that'd be 4, that would be 6, and obviously that would be 8 points. So that's another way you'll score extra points that way. Now there is such a thing as a round here as well. So the way the game is going to end is once this bag is completely empty of tiles, okay, once it's completely empty, that triggers the end of the round. I mean, that triggers the last round. And so then you'll finish the round up, and then you might even take some of these tiles here to finish up the round. So that's why there's 15 tiles set aside with this red token on top, is because you might need to fill in your trucks. So the way it would work is you would take, on your turn, you would take an animal or a tile. So let me do that. So let me take out 1 tile from the bag. Let's say I'm player 1 here, and I'm going to put this giant panda here. That's an action. I get 1 action per turn, and so then my turn would be done. That's all I do for 1 particular action. And then player 2 could go. Now there are 3 different types of actions in this game. You can put an animal on a truck. You can take a truck. So, for instance, if I just wanted this giant panda, I could take this truck on a future turn, even though there's only 1 animal here or 1 tile here, and I could take it, and that would be an action. Okay, I could do that. That's a possibility. And then the third action is actually these are coins. These are money coins here. So there are several different actions you can take that are called money actions. And so, like, for instance, one of the actions you can take with money is if you have 3 coins, you can spend 3 coins to expand your zoo, meaning you get to flip over this expansion tile here to add an additional enclosure to your zoo. That's one of the things you're going to do with a money coin, obviously. Action. Another type of action you can take, though, is you can discard 1 token from your barn for 2 coins. So you might have a lot of different species in here, maybe. Or maybe you have some kiosks in your barn. You basically discard one of those tokens for 2 coins. So that might be a way to help minimize the amount of points you're going to lose that are sitting in your barn here. And then you can also purchase a token. You can purchase a token from your opponent's barn. Let's say they have a bunch of a particular species, and now their barn has that animal, and you need that animal to help fill in your zoo. You can spend 2 coins, giving them 1 of the coins and 1 to the bank up there to take that animal from their barn and put it into your zoo. That's how that would work. That's how you can do that. And they can't block you. So they don't have a choice. That you can take that and buy that token from them. It doesn't matter. But they still at least get a coin, even though they can't block it. Another thing you can do is you can move 1 token. So for instance, maybe you did fill in these enclosures earlier, and one of them ended up in here. Or maybe earlier you took an animal and it had nowhere else to go but your barn, or a kiosk for that matter, and it had to go to your barn. But then later on you were able to, like, for instance, obviously build this additional enclosure, and now you have this empty enclosure here. For 1 coin, you could move that animal from here to there, basically. That's basically what you could do. 1 animal token. You can also exchange 2 animal species as well. So strategically wise, obviously, maybe perhaps you have a lot of, let's say you put giant pandas in this bigger enclosure, and you've only got a few, and it doesn't look like you're going to fill in your enclosure anytime soon with giant pandas. But you have 6 lions sitting in your barn. As an action, you could spend 1 coin to exchange all of 1 species from the barn with an animal enclosure of your choice. And then the animals that were originally here would go into your barn instead. You can also do it with enclosures. So you can exchange 1 species of animals with this species of animals that might be over here, and put them vice versa. That's one of the things you can do. But when you're interacting with the barn, if I, for instance, had 7 zebras sitting in this barn, and I wanted to exchange and fill this up with zebras, I wouldn't be able to do that, because the species that I'm taking from the barn, they all have to be able to fit into the enclosure that I'm exchanging with. So that's the disadvantage of that. So you're definitely going to want to make sure that they can all fit before you take that action. But those are the different types of money actions that you can take on your turn. And obviously, placing an animal on a truck or taking a truck is another type of action. Now, how does a round end? Like I said, a round it ends when all players have taken a truck. But here's the thing. When a player decides to take a truck and then do whatever they're going to do with the animal, like maybe put this animal here into their zoo, they hold on to the truck and then they pass. Passing means they no longer can take any actions during the rest of the round. That means the other player, or players if you're playing with multiple players, can still continue to take actions, which is cool, because if you're playing a 2-player game and someone decided to take a truck early, now whatever you're placing into the truck, you don't have to worry about the other player taking that truck. So now, you don't have to worry about them potentially taking something that you really want before you were obviously able to take it yourself. So that's the advantage of not being the first player to take a truck versus the player who takes a truck first. And then, of course, once each player has taken a truck, then that ends the round. And in the next round, the player who took the truck last will actually go first for that round. So that's how that's going to work. So I pretty much explained the game pretty well, but let's just do some more demonstration here. So, obviously, player 1 put the giant panda in that truck there. So then player 2 would take a tile from the bag, and then they could choose to either place it here or they could place it here. There is no like limitations to placing tiles in trucks. So you can have multiple species of the same one in the same truck. You could put 2 species into 2 different trucks. It doesn't matter. But for instance, maybe I would want to put this coin here on this truck there. So maybe perhaps maybe the other player would want to take the giant panda and the coin right away. Who knows? But then that would be one turn. And then player 1 would go again. Ooh, and he'd be like, you know what? I'm going to put this coin here, and the giant panda there. So now that player is only going to get the giant panda if they take that truck. Then obviously player 2 doesn't have much choice because they don't want to take the giant panda and the 2 coins. So then they're going to be like, oh, look at this. We have this male zebra here. We're going to put the male zebra in that truck because that's the only place we can put it. And player 1 is like, okay, you know what? I'm going to take this now. And then they're going to be like, oh, hey, I got this awesome zebra here. I'm going to put it into this enclosure. And now that player is forced to take that truck, basically. But he's getting at least 2 coins and a giant panda. So that's something, right? And then, he takes the giant panda and he puts it into an enclosure. And then he takes these 2 coin tokens, removes them from himself, and adds 2 coins to his personal supply. So now he can expand if he wants to. He's got some coins to obviously do stuff with money actions and things like that. That would be the end of a round. And then because he was the player that took the truck last, he's actually going first this round, for instance. So there's a little bit of strategy of when to take tiles from the truck and when not to, obviously. Now, why did I take this 1 zebra? Well, for one thing, this 1 zebra is a male, which means he's fertile. He's a fertile male. So that means if I can get a fertile female into the same enclosure, that means immediately they're going to have a baby. And that baby, if there's space for it, it's going to go into the enclosure with the parents. But if there isn't, then the baby can just go into the barn. So this is an additional way of helping you fill in your zoo. Now, in a 2-player game, it's not necessary to basically go for the male and female because you're going to fill in your zoo, no problem. You actually want to try to limit the amount of animals you take in a 2-player game because of that. But in a 5-player game, you're not going to have an easy time getting all of the animals and filling them in your zoo. And so then you're going to be like, I really want to get that baby animal if I can because it's going to help me fill in my enclosure. But yeah, that's another thing. Oh, and then one more thing I forgot to mention. There's one other thing that can happen. So when you fill in an enclosure, some of these enclosures, if they're completely filled in with animals, they're going to give you coins. So this one here, once this enclosure is completely filled in, you get a coin immediately. So it's like just an additional money you get. If you fill in this enclosure, once it's filled in with animals, then you get 2 coins. You'll notice, however, you don't get any coins if once you fill in this enclosure. No coins at all. But then this expansion one will give you a coin once it's completely full of animals. So there's some additional ways of getting coins besides just simply putting a coin tile or token on the truck. But basically, that's how you play Zooloretto. And then obviously, once all of these tiles are removed from the bag, that triggers the end of game. And then you will finish the round and then count up your points and deduct your points as they go, depending on species of animals you have in your barn. So I think that explains it pretty well. So thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you guys liked it. Leave me a like if you guys liked it. All right, bye.